Hi, very glad to see you on the channel. Before you start listening to the story, write in the comments whether you like the voice on the video. It started like most of our cabin weekends do. Quiet hum of tires against winding Tennessee backroads, Lori humming along to the country station, and me gripping the steering wheel tighter than usual without knowing why. Something had been different about her lately. Maybe it was the sudden attention to detail when packing, the constant glances at her phone she thought I didn't catch, or the slightly forced laughs when I tried to joke about how our dog, Buck, had more sense than half the town combined. I told myself I was overthinking it, that the stress from work was making me paranoid, but deep down, the gut never lies. We arrived just before sunset, the cabin standing tall and familiar against the backdrop of budding trees and the distant whistle of the wind. This place had been our getaway for years. Same creaky porch, same musty scent of wood and pine. Yet the air felt heavy. I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but something told me this weekend would be different. I unloaded the truck while Lori busied herself inside, fluffing pillows and making small talk with Monica and Wes, our usual cabin crew. Wes, always the joker, handed me a beer and slapped my back. "To another wild April Fool's weekend," he said, grinning like he owned the place. I chuckled along, but something about the way Lori barely looked up from her phone, offering only a half smile, dug under my skin. The night moved along like clockwork, grilled steaks, bad stories, and cheap whiskey. Monica tried to pull Lori into her usual antics of board games and late-night gossip, but Lori claimed a headache and disappeared to the bedroom early. I tried to play it cool, sipping my drink and swapping stories with Wes on the porch. Still, I couldn't help but glance at my watch every few minutes. It wasn't like Lori to leave the fun so soon. As midnight rolled around and everyone started turning in, I found myself standing by the cabin window, watching the soft glow of the tool shed light flicker through the trees. At first, I thought nothing of it. Maybe someone forgot to shut it off. Then movement. Two silhouettes swaying close. Too close. One of them was Lori. I squinted, holding my breath, watching as she leaned into the other figure, unmistakably Wes. They were laughing, touching like some cheap soap opera I couldn't turn off. I gripped the edge of the windowsill so hard I thought I'd splinter the wood. My chest tightened, but I forced myself to breathe. I wasn't going to storm out there, wasn't going to make a scene. Not yet. Instead, I stepped back, watching the whole thing unfold like it wasn't even real. My best friend and my wife, right there under the glow of that rusty shed light. I wanted to throw open the door, drag Wes out by the collar, but something stopped me. Maybe it was the years of knowing Lori too well, or maybe it was the realization that this wasn't just a one-time mistake. No, this had planning written all over it. As they eventually snuck back toward the cabin like two teenagers avoiding curfew, I slipped away from the window and into the shadows of the hallway, heart pounding, but mind sharp. I knew then that I wasn't going to shout or cry. I was going to wait. Play it cool. If they thought I didn't know, they'd keep slipping up. I let them write the story themselves. And when the time was right, I'd be the one holding the pen. I lay awake that night, listening to Lori's soft breathing beside me, eyes fixed on the ceiling, knowing full well that the real April Fool's joke was about to be on them. The next morning, the smell of bacon and fresh coffee filled the cabin, but it didn't sit right with me. Lori stood at the stove humming as if nothing had happened, flipping pancakes like we were still some happy couple on a weekend retreat. Wes lounged at the table, cracking jokes with Monica, eyes darting to Lori every few seconds, not even bothering to hide it. I sat down across from him, forcing a smile as I stirred my coffee, watching them closely, every subtle glance and nervous laugh registering like tally marks in my head. "Sleep all right?" Lori asked, flashing me a grin that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Like a baby," I lied, watching Wes nearly choke on his coffee. Lori's hand trembled slightly as she set down a plate of pancakes in front of me. That was the first crack, the first confirmation that I hadn't imagined the night before. The morning carried on with everyone pretending it was just another cabin weekend, but the weight of what I knew made every conversation feel like a rehearsed line from a poorly written play. I helped Monica gather firewood behind the cabin, needing an excuse to clear my head. As we trudged through the woods, She vented about Lori's recent flakiness, how she'd missed a few of their usual coffee catch-ups and started bailing on group plans more often. "You two all right?" Monica asked, side-eyeing me while stacking logs. "Never better," I said with a tight-lipped grin, but Monica didn't look convinced. I figured if anyone would sniff something out eventually, it'd be her. Back inside, while everyone got ready for a hike, I noticed Lori's backpack open on the bed. Normally, I wouldn't snoop, but normal went out the window the moment I saw her sneaking around with Wes. As I casually sorted through, pretending to grab a jacket, I found a small black box tucked into the side pocket. At first, I thought it might be a gift for me, maybe something sentimental she planned to surprise me with later. But when I slid it open, my stomach sank. Inside was a sleek silver compass, engraved with a phrase that read, "Wherever you are, find your way back to me. W." My blood boiled, but I stayed calm. I clenched the box, forcing myself to smile as Lori called from the other room, asking if I was ready. "Almost," I said, slipping the box into my own jacket pocket. The hike was long, filled with small talk and the occasional awkward silence. But the real show was watching Lori and Wes constantly try to act casual, stepping just a little too close on narrow trails, laughing at jokes that weren't that funny. I nodded along, letting them believe I was clueless. When we returned, I waited until everyone was showering or napping, and with steady hands, I took the compass out to the old workbench behind the cabin. I knew exactly what to do. I pried the back open, scratched the engraving just enough to distort it, then filled the inner workings with a bit of lake water and dirt, making sure it would rust and seize up in no time. It wouldn't be obvious at first, but eventually, when Wes would try to gift it or Lori would hand it off, it would fail, just like their secret. That night around the campfire, the compass sat hidden in my jacket as I laughed along to stories, tossed another log on the fire, and kept up appearances. Lori seemed relaxed again, thinking the weekend was going smooth. I knew better. Every movement, every side glance they shared only strengthened my resolve. The pieces were moving exactly where I needed them. As everyone headed to bed, I lingered by the dying embers of the fire, staring at the dark woods beyond. I wasn't going to just expose them. No, that would be too simple. I wanted them to feel it, to think they were winning, to feel comfortable, safe, like they had outsmarted me. Only then would the truth hit them harder than anything they'd expect. And I was going to enjoy every second of it. The next day began like nothing had changed, but everything inside me was shifting. Lori made coffee as if she hadn't just been sneaking around with Wes, and Wes carried on with the group as if he wasn't the most predictable cliché walking in hiking boots. The weekend was supposed to be about laughter, fishing, and campfire stories, but now every smile felt forced, every gesture suspect. I played along, though, letting the game stretch just a little longer. After breakfast, Monica suggested a trip to the small craft fair down in the valley. Everyone agreed, and I saw it as the perfect opportunity to step back and observe. The fair was lively, full of locals selling homemade jams, carved with trinkets, and overpriced t-shirts. Lori clung a little closer to me than usual, like she was making up for something. "You okay?" she asked, lacing her fingers through mine. I nodded and squeezed her hand, watching out of the corner of my eye as Wes trailed behind, nervously eyeing us like a dog that had been caught chewing on a shoe but didn't know if the owner had noticed yet. I spotted the town photographer, Mitch, a friend of mine who had a booth of old black and white prints. I struck up conversation, and soon Monica wandered over, giving me the perfect moment to pull her aside. "You notice anything weird about Lori and Wes?" I asked quietly. Monica's eyes widened slightly, but she masked it quickly. "Weird how?" she asked. "Just off," I replied, keeping it vague. She shrugged, but the shift in her posture told me enough. Monica knew something wasn't right, but didn't want to be the one to say it. I let it go for now. Back at the cabin that evening, Lori kept checking her phone, slipping into the other room for work calls. Wes disappeared a few times too, claiming to be chopping extra firewood, but returned without so much as a splinter. I played cards with Monica and the others, watching, listening, piecing it all together like a puzzle I wished I never started. Later that night, when the group gathered around the fire again, I noticed Wes sipping nervously on a flask, try to steal glances at Lori without being obvious. They were slipping. I could feel it. I leaned back, pretending to focus on Monica's story about her ridiculous neighbor back home. But my mind kept circling the drain of what I knew. After everyone went to bed, I stayed up, pretending to stoke the fire. Lori came out, wrapped in a blanket, acting like nothing was weighing on her. "Hey, can't sleep?" she asked softly. I shrugged. Too much on my mind. She sat beside me and rested her head on my shoulder. I forced myself to stay calm, my heart hammering as I fought the urge to just say it, to tell her I knew. But I didn't. Not yet. I needed more. The next morning, I followed Wes when he claimed he was heading to the lake early to fish. From a distance, I watched as he paced around nervously on the dock, checking his phone, muttering to himself. Lori showed up 15 minutes later. I couldn't hear much, but their body language said everything. They were arguing. Lori gestured wildly. Wes threw his hands up, then they hugged awkwardly before parting ways. I slipped back to the cabin before either of them noticed me. When Lori returned, she acted like she'd just been for a walk. "Beautiful out this morning," she said. I nodded, watching her with a hollow sort of interest. "Yep, perfect day." I spent the rest of the day playing the doting husband, helping with meals, fixing the busted screen door, laughing along with the group. But inside, I was wound tight as a coil. It wasn't just about the betrayal anymore. It was about watching them dig themselves deeper. They thought they were careful. They thought I was blind. But soon, they'd realize just how wrong they were. The compass in my jacket felt heavier with each passing hour, like a reminder of the slow burn I was orchestrating. I wasn't just going to catch them. I was going to make sure they regretted every step they took thinking they were ahead of me. The next few days at the cabin blurred into a quiet storm inside me. Outwardly, I was just Travis, helping with chores, cracking jokes, keeping everyone's spirits high. Inwardly, I was watching, calculating, and waiting. Every whisper between Lori and Wes fed the fire. I knew it. I could almost map the timing. She'd slip away under the excuse of needing fresh air, and Wes would follow minutes later, claiming he left something in the truck or needed to check the fishing rods. I had noticed that they always came back together too, but with a studied gap, trying too hard not to seem like they were. The rest of the group either didn't notice or chose not to, which in small towns is just as likely. People keep out of things that might make a mess of friendships. But I wasn't interested in saving anything anymore. I wanted the full picture before I acted. Late that afternoon, as the clouds gathered for a typical Tennessee spring storm, I offered to make a grocery run into town. I needed a moment away to clear my head and plan, but also I needed to see Monica. She wasn't just Lori's friend anymore. She'd become a quiet observer like me. In town, I found her near the general store porch, thumbing through her phone and sipping sweet tea like she didn't have a care in the world. I sat down beside her. "You got a minute?" I asked. She didn't look up, just nodded. "What's really going on between Lori and Wes?" I asked. Monica shifted, biting the corner of her lip, debating whether to answer. After a long pause, she whispered, "Travis, I think you already know." I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. "I just need to hear it." Monica exhaled sharply. "They've been sneaking around. I saw them together at the winter bonfire, too. I didn't want to say anything without proof, but I've seen enough now." My stomach churned, but there was no surprise left in me, only a grim sort of validation. I thanked her, told her to act like we never had the conversation, and left her with a nod. Back at the cabin, the storm outside cracked through the mountains, heavy sheets of rain pressing against the windows. Lori was busy helping Wes organize fishing gear in the shed when I returned, conveniently out of sight. I played along, tossing the groceries onto the counter and calling out, "Food's back if anyone's hungry." Later, around the fire, I kept stealing glances at Monica. She avoided looking directly at Lori and Wes, her silence confirming everything again without words. Even the way Lori laughed felt hollow now, like someone faking normal just to keep the illusion afloat. Wes stayed close to the whiskey bottle, and I noticed him growing more paranoid as the hours dragged on. He could feel me watching. I wanted him to. It was the first time I enjoyed watching him squirm. The rain let up briefly, leaving the woods damp and quiet. The group retreated to their rooms, leaving me alone on the porch. Lori slipped out to join me, holding 2 mugs of cocoa. Storm something? Huh, she said, sitting beside me. I sipped mine, eyeing the mist over the trees. Yeah, fitting. She glanced at me sideways. Everything okay with you? You've been quiet. I forced a chuckle, just soaking it all in. Cabin weekends don't last forever. She smiled softly, leaning against me like nothing was wrong, like she wasn't sneaking off with someone who used to sit at my dinner table. I didn't pull away. I let her believe I was clueless. The longer she believed it, the harder the fall would be when the truth finally snapped into place. I watched the rain return, washing down the window panes and cloaking the woods. The perfect cover for liars. But I wasn't going to expose them just yet. Not until it would hurt the most. For now, I let the storm keep them warm and comfortable. The next morning brought a calm, eerie fog that rolled through the trees like something out of an old storybook. Everyone was slow to rise, shaking off the storm's restless sleep. I stood on the porch early, sipping black coffee as the fog curled around the cabin. The place almost looked innocent in the mist, like it hadn't become the stage for betrayal. Inside, the creaking of floorboards told me the others were stirring. Wes emerged first, trying to act casual, but I could see it, the nervous darting of his eyes, the half-hearted small talk. I could practically hear his heart pounding from across the room. Lori wasn't far behind, wrapped in one of the blankets Monica usually used. She barely made eye contact with me, and I didn't push it. I just watched. Watching had become second nature now. I wasn't rushing anymore. Let them dig their own hole. Around breakfast, the group gathered in the kitchen, throwing together pancakes and scrambled eggs like nothing was wrong. But something was off. Monica avoided Lori's gaze entirely, keeping conversation light but distant. I chimed in here and there, playing the part of the easygoing husband, making sure to keep the atmosphere falsely warm. But underneath it all, I was boiling. I needed more than suspicion in Monica's word. I needed proof that could shatter the comfortable lie Lori was hiding behind. Later that afternoon, I found it. While Lori was checking on supplies with Wes at the shed again, I wandered into our room, pretending to look for my missing flannel. That's when I noticed her hiking backpack, half-zipped and awkwardly tucked behind the dresser. Curiosity got the better of me. Inside, under some old trail maps and gloves, I found a small box, wrapped neatly, with Wes's initials scribbled on a gift tag. Inside was a vintage compass, engraved on the back with a simple message: "You always find your way to me." My jaw locked. There was plain as day. No more guessing. No more second-guessing Monica's warning. This wasn't some friendly gift between hikers. This was intimacy disguised as sentimentality. I shut the box calmly, but my mind was anything but calm. I could barely steady my breathing as I put it back exactly as I found it. No confrontation yet. Not now. Instead, I walked outside and saw them sitting side by side near the shed, pretending to be looking over camping gear. Lori caught my eyes and smiled like nothing was wrong. But I knew better now. I knew the exact coordinates of where her heart had wandered. That night, while the others enjoyed drinks and card games in the main room, I excused myself early, feigning a headache. But I didn't go to bed. I snuck out back to the firewood stack, grabbed that little compass gift, and with a screwdriver from my toolbox, I carefully opened the back, removed the engraved plate, and replaced it with a fake one. The new engraving? Property of Travis. It was petty. It was perfect. I resealed the box and tucked it back into Lori's pack, making sure everything looked untouched. The next time Wes opened it, he'd get the message, and so would Lori when the time came. By the time I returned inside, everyone was winding down. Lori came over and softly asked, "Feeling any better?" I nodded, keeping my mask on. "Much better," I said. "Think I'll turn in early still." She smiled, relieved. "All right. Love you." I just nodded and went upstairs. I didn't say it back. I didn't have to. Not tonight. Lying awake in bed, I heard them laughing downstairs. I could picture Wes stealing glances at her, thinking he was getting away with it. I could picture Lori doing the same, oblivious to the fact that the ground beneath her feet had already started to crack. I wasn't going to lose sleep anymore. I was going to let this play out exactly how it needed to. Let them make the next move. I just made mine. The next morning, I kept my routine unchanged. I rose with the sun, made coffee, chopped some firewood, and played the part of the dutiful host. Inside, the others were still scattered between sleep and hangovers, none the wiser. Lori stayed unusually close to me, draping herself over my shoulder now and then like a woman clinging to the illusion of innocence. Wes, on the other hand, kept his distance, eyes glued to his phone or the floor. His discomfort was as loud as the storm the night before. As I split another log, I couldn't help but think, good. Let it eat at you. I wasn't going to tip my hand yet, not until it was time to break everything apart cleanly. I wanted them both to sit in their borrowed time for just a little longer. After breakfast, Monica offered to go on a short hike with me to the ridge. Lori tried to invite herself along, but Monica, sharp as ever, smoothly said, I think Travis and I could use some fresh air without the crowd. Lori hesitated, then shrugged. Suit yourself. As Monica and I walked the trail, I shared everything. The compass, the engraved message, and a quiet prank I'd slipped into Lori's backpack. Monica's mouth fell open, but she quickly recovered with a grin. That's the kind of quiet justice I like, she said. But you're not stopping there, are you? I shook my head. Not even close. The hike back was quiet but comfortable. Monica knew now, and I trusted her enough to help me if I needed it. As we approached the cabin, I caught a glimpse of Lori and Wes sitting at the edge of the dock. Wes's hand rested a little too comfortably on Lori's knee. I felt a flash of heat rise through me, but I let it simmer. Let them think they're safe. Let them feel bold. That's exactly what I needed them to do. That evening, I noticed Wes had gone into town to pick up some firewood, even though we had plenty stacked out back. Lori wandered upstairs shortly after, claiming she needed a nap. Monica and I exchanged a glance. Something was brewing. I pretended not to care, carrying on with the others, playing cards and making small talk, but my mind was racing. When Lori finally returned, hours later, she acted like nothing happened. But the faint smell of Wes's cologne lingered on her jacket. They were slipping, growing careless. Later that night, while everyone gathered around the fire pit, Lori slid next to me, resting her head on my shoulder like she hadn't been sneaking off. Everything all right? She whispered. Perfect, I replied, steady as stone. You? She nodded, eyes soft. Yeah, just glad you're here. The audacity nearly made me laugh. I could feel Monica watching from across the flames, silently urging me to hold my ground. And I did. I let Lori lean into me, let her fingers trace idle patterns on my arm, and I acted like I hadn't seen her betray me with my so-called best friend. When the fire died down and the others trickled back into the cabin, I stayed outside alone, staring up at the stars. I wasn't sure what angered me more, Lori's betrayal or the fact that Wes thought I wouldn't notice. The more I thought about it, the more the pieces came together. Every late-night errand, every extra trip to the woodshed, every giggle behind closed doors. The picture was clear now, and I had no interest in shattering it just yet. Not until the moment would sting the most. Before turning in for the night, I stopped by the storage shed. Inside, under the dim glow of my flashlight, I checked behind the old crates where I knew Wes sometimes hid beer from the others. Sure enough, a crumpled blanket, 2 empty beer bottles, and a set of Lori's earrings lay tucked beneath the tarp. Proof. Physical, undeniable proof. I snapped a photo with my phone, heart pounding, not out of sadness, but out of the pure, focused anticipation of what came next. I wasn't just going to catch them. I was going to make sure they saw exactly what it felt like to be blindsided. As I locked the shed and headed back to the cabin, I knew the clock had started ticking. And this time, I controlled every second of it. The next morning broke crisp and golden, the kind of spring air that made you forget how rotten people could be. I busied myself with breakfast, flipping pancakes like nothing was stirring beneath the surface. Lori acted normal, humming along to a tune on the radio, sliding up beside me every few minutes as if nothing were wrong. Wes showed up late to the table, eyes averted, rubbing the back of his neck like he hadn't slept a wink. I could tell from Monica's sideways glances that she caught on to their guilt too. She was sharper than the others gave her credit for, and I was grateful to have her in my corner without even asking. As we all gathered around the cabin's long wooden table, I wore the same patient smile I'd perfected since I first saw them sneaking around. After breakfast, the crew scattered to pack up for the drive home. But not me. I had one more move to play. I told everyone I wanted one last group photo before we left, a tradition we'd done every year. They all agreed, none the wiser. Lori even seemed touched that I still cared enough to make the weekend feel normal. "You're still the sweet one," she teased, brushing her hand along my jaw. I nodded, letting the weight of that irony settle quietly in my chest. I chose the dock for the photo. The lake behind us mirrored the cloudless sky perfectly, and everyone gathered without hesitation. But this time, I positioned the camera differently. I set it up on a tripod with a delayed shutter, enough time for me to step away and adjust things behind the camera. What I was really doing was pressing record, not snap. A video would tell the story I needed, not a still frame. As I moved back to join them, I slipped Monica a knowing glance. She gave me the faintest nod. Just as we were about to take the shot, I said, "Actually, I got a little surprise first." I pulled out my phone and cast the image from it onto the small portable projector we had used the night before for movies. Up on the side of the cabin flashed the photo I'd snapped inside the woodshed. The blanket, the bottles, and Lori's earrings glinting like a signature on a betrayal. Gasps rippled through the group, followed by a chilling silence. Lori's face drained of color. "Travis, what is this?" she stammered. Wes stumbled back a step. I crossed my arms and tilted my head. "You tell me. I just found your secret little clubhouse." Monica broke the silence with a low, deliberate whistle. "Guess we know who's been sneaking off during charades." Lori's eyes darted between Wes and me, mouth opening but no words coming out. Wes's hands were stuffed deep in his jacket pockets, but even from where I stood, I could see them trembling. The others, some of whom had known us for years, stood in shock, unsure whether to intervene or fade away. I didn't raise my voice, didn't cause a scene. I didn't need to. The truth was already echoing through the still air, far louder than any yelling ever could. Lori stepped toward me, eyes pleading. It wasn't like that. I cut her off with a slow shake of my head. "Don't," I said simply. "I've heard enough." I turned to the group. "Thanks for another great April Fool's weekend, folks. Just one thing. Next year, check who's playing the fool." And with that, I walked past her, straight toward Monica, who without hesitation linked her arm with mine. We headed up the path toward the trucks without another word. Behind me, I heard whispers start to bubble up, no doubt the beginning of the wildfire that would carry this story through town by nightfall. I didn't care. I wasn't sticking around to hear them. I was already thinking about the next step, the next move. Monica leaned in as we climbed the trail and whispered, "You could have gone bigger." I grinned without looking at her. "Oh, we're just getting started." The drive back into town was quieter than I expected, but not uncomfortable. Monica and I shared a few knowing glances between the winding roads and blooming dogwoods, but neither of us felt the need to fill the air with idle talk. The silence wasn't awkward. It was the calm after a storm that I'd been standing in alone for too long. By the time we reached the outskirts of town, the group chat from the cabin weekend had exploded. I could see the notifications popping up on my dash screen every few minutes. I didn't bother opening them. I already knew what they were saying. Word traveled fast in our little corner of Tennessee, especially when it came with a dose of scandal. I dropped Monica off at her place and thanked her for playing along, but her smirk told me she wasn't just playing. She was in it with me, no strings, just mutual understanding. Back home, the house felt different. Maybe it was just me, maybe it was always this way, and I had been too blind to see it before. I noticed the small things, how Lori's shoes weren't where she usually left them, the faint scent of Wes's cologne lingering by the front door, and the absence of guilt in my own reflection when I passed by the hallway mirror. I wasn't second-guessing anymore. I wasn't a fool. Later that evening, Lori showed up. I didn't hear her at first. The creaky porch gave her away. I stayed seated on the couch, watching the glow of the evening sun dip below the hills outside. She stepped in like a stranger, looking at the floor, rubbing her hands nervously. "Travis," she began, barely above a whisper. "Please, let me explain." I didn't even turn my head. "Explain what? The woodshed? The late-night walks? Or the earrings you left behind like breadcrumbs?" She flinched like I'd hit her, but I wasn't yelling. I didn't need to. The weight of truth carried more force than any raised voice. She tried again, stepping closer. It was a mistake. It wasn't supposed to mean anything. I finally looked at her. Funny. It looked like it meant plenty from where I was standing. Her voice cracked, desperation seeping through. It was just a moment of weakness. We can work through this. I tilted my head, studying her like I would a half-finished jigsaw puzzle. Since when does betrayal come with an expiration date? You didn't seem so weak sneaking around. She dropped onto the arm of the couch, shoulders sagging. Travis, please. Don't throw away everything we've built. I stood up, slow and steady, walking past her toward the kitchen. I poured myself a glass of water, savoring every second of the silence stretching between us. You already did, I said without looking back. Lori's eyes brimmed with tears as she tried one last card. I messed up, but you've messed up too. I turned, raising a brow. Oh, how so? She faltered, realizing she had no ground to stand on. She tried to pivot, reaching out. I'm sorry. I still love you. The words sounded hollow, like she was rehearsing them rather than feeling them. I set the glass down on the counter. You love the safety, not me. I walked past her toward the front door. You want to grab your things, I said without flinching. And next time, pick a better hiding spot than the woodshed. I left her sitting there, surrounded by a home that no longer felt like hers. I stepped onto the porch and into the fading evening light, knowing full well that the town would be buzzing by morning. I didn't care. Let them talk. I had spent too long protecting the illusion of a perfect life. Now, I was ready to live a real one. By the time I drove out to Monica's place later that night, I wasn't looking for revenge. I was looking for peace. And as she opened the door and smiled, I realized I'd already found it. Thank you for listening to the end. I hope you enjoyed it very much. Don't forget to give a like and tell us in the comments what you would do in such a situation.